For many generations of Star Wars fans, the Rebels were not just simply the good guys. They were unquestionably the heroes we rooted for. They were a cohesive band of troublemakers fighting in unison to defeat evil. There was no question of how, no debates on what was needed to be done, no one wondering why this choice should even be made. There was no need. The Rebel Alliance represented the people of the galaxy standing up to oppression in one voice through action, saying, "We rebel." Yet there is more to the story of the Rebel Alliance. It is a story full of words becoming action, community emerging from isolation, and a valuable lesson in finding strength through diversity. It ended in victory. It was born out of defeat. This is the evolution of the rebellion. By the time we truly meet the rebels in A New Hope, you can be excused for not immediately picking up on the cracks in the foundations that had to be mended before starting the Galactic Civil War. The rebels operating on Yavin 4 were definitely a ragtag bunch, but they were a unified fighting force. Outgunned, undermanned, yes, but this was clearly a military group fighting to defend themselves and the people of the galaxy. But the clues to the story were always there, and they began with the somber eyes and regal words of Mon Mothma, as portrayed by Carolyn Blakiston in 1983's Return of the Jedi. In just a few moments of screen time, the rebel leader delivered a famous Star Wars line.
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
And presented a serious tone that raised the stakes of the final stand against Palpatine and his minions. Yet it was the words of author James Caan in his novelization of the movie that gave us a peek below the surface and at the framework for much of the future of Star Wars storytelling set in the Age of Rebellion. Mothma was one of the political leaders in the Grand Republic that was quite suddenly swept away in the wake of the Galactic Empire's emergence and had immediately begun to resist as they assimilated into the new government, senators like Bail Organa among them. This ties directly to the famous deleted scenes from the Revenge of the Sith and moments in Obi-Wan Kenobi and what is coming in Andor. The novel described Mothma having to organize several cells, pockets of resistance operating so independently of each other that they often didn't know the other cells existed. This ties directly to the storytelling and early struggles of the rebellion in Star Wars Rebels and novels like A New Dawn, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Rebel Rising. James Caan described how Mon Mothma had to go underground, no longer able to carry on the fight in the halls of the Imperial government, which was later paid off in Star Wars Rebels.
I hereby resign from the Senate to fight for you. We will not rest until we bring an end to the Empire.
It also painted a picture of thousands of guerrilla fighters bringing their own approaches to the resistance and morality to those methods, which led to storytelling around Saw Gerrera and his partisans, Memphis Nest and the Cloud Riders, and the ongoing tales of the Bad Batch. In any story in which the oppressed of the galaxy decide to take action against their oppressors. And all roads lead back to Mon Mothma, Princess Leia, and the leaders that were needed to unite thousands of systems, countless individuals, and myriad methods in a fight for survival.
This is our rebellion.
Those roads forward began as the Republic began to fall. In the final days of the Clone War, the Delegation of 2000 was formed, made up of senators concerned about the continuing and often unrelenting power grab being made by the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic, Sheev Palpatine. Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, and Padme Amidala were at the center of the delegation. Often meeting in secret in the offices of Senator Organa or Senator Amidala's apartment, the delegation began to broach the subject of how to challenge Palpatine in his bold moves like taking control of the Jedi Council and using the sector governance decree to install his own regional governors in power to lessen the capabilities of the Senate to rule. Unlike the Separatists that had just seemingly waged a war on the Republic and brought fire to the galaxy, though as we know, real political concerns were inflamed by two Sith Lords manipulating the conflict, the Delegation of 2000 wanted to preserve the Republic and maintain democracy.
We are not separatists trying to leave the Republic. We are loyalists trying to preserve democracy in the Republic.
They were truly fighting from the inside of the system to root out the poisonous power plays of Palpatine and politicians trying to selfishly solidify their station. And this made it a tough sell to some of those concerned. Mon Mothma and Bail Organa had to choose their words carefully.
We cannot let this turn into another war.
Absolutely, that is the last thing we want.
This wasn't a rebellion. They didn't want to start a war. They just wanted things to return to as they were before the outbreak of the Clone War. Palpatine listened to them, did his best to quell their fears, and made note of those he needed to deal with.
On behalf of the Delegation of 2000, I thank you, Chancellor.
I thank you for bringing this to my attention, Senator.
The Republic was going to fall. Palpatine would see to that, and the Delegation of 2000's political concerns would become very real dread. The day after Palpatine's empire formed, many of the Delegation of 2000 were arrested on charges of conspiracy and treason. Resisting was going to be harder than just simply using the weapons of policy and procedure. The rebellion needed to go underground. And the underground, the actual worlds of this galaxy, was where the oppression was being felt immediately.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
As thunderous applause from the privileged elite were still ringing through the Senate chambers of Coruscant, the mood across the galaxy was immediately turning dark and grim. The former Clone Force 99, now known as the Bad Batch, were a group of elite clone troopers fighting to preserve the Republic now on the run and a former Republic being crushed by those who claimed they saved it. As they struggled to find their place in this new world, the fight the Bad Batch took up was more of survival, self-preservation. Take care of yous and yours, you might say. Just keep your head down and keep going. But with each mission and each visit to another affected world, the Bad Batch saw the truth. The Empire wasn't bringing safety and security, it was already bringing control and compliance. It was stripping cultures of individuality and planets of resources. And while the politicians, even those that took issue with it all, faded up higher and higher into the exclusive and unaffected halls of government, the denizens of the galaxy were starting to look for ways to fight back. They had to. The Empire was destroying everything, and the repercussions were being felt in ways not easily seen. A young criminal from Corellia with his dreams up in the stars saw his family unit destroyed as the Empire took over and dismantled a once proud industry of shipbuilders. It wasn't as simple as stormtroopers marching in and barking orders. It was the erosion of what once was, and the trickle-down effect was felt by the likes of Han, Kira, and the so-called scrum rats of the streets. While they felt the direct effects, the criminal underworld began to thrive as the Empire worked hand in hand with those helping to spread fear and dismay into every system. And as the Empire mined more and more resources like coaxium, Durastil, Tabana, and more, the criminal syndicates like Crimson Dawn helped drain resources and crush the communities surrounding them along the way. And this is where the seeds of rebellion began to grow. While the rebellion would grow to a full-fledged military operation and would always need the support of the politicians on high, the true fight began smaller and more organically. Though the story was repeated over and over from planet to planet, Memphis Nest represented the new face of rebellion. She was just one person, a young woman whose mother was lost in the fight. She was not part of a military, not an elected official. She was someone who watched her family be destroyed, her traditions trampled, and her community was on the brink of extinction. And when she looked around, she wasn't alone. That fight for self-preservation, exemplified by the likes of the Bad Batch earlier, or even a young Han just trying to get back home to save one person, wasn't what Memphis Nest was about.
Each of our worlds has been brutalized by the syndicates, in league with the Empire.
She looked up and saw others that shared the same need, the need to fight back.
We're not marauders, we're allies.
She chooses to put on the mask handed down by her mother and take the Cloud Riders to war. Not against the Empire, not yet anyway, but against the criminal underworld left to their own devices, syndicates allowed to run amok. The end goal wasn't the political and militaristic victory that would emerge later. It was simply a battle for something new, hope. And that hope came in the form of the resources being taken from them. The quest for hyperfuel.
Coaxium! Enough to power a fleet!
The valuable coaxium at the center of Solo, a Star Wars story, wasn't one of profit or power. It wasn't a quest for the resources to fuel super weapons and Star Destroyers. It was a quest for something other than the hell being experienced as the Empire's boot pressed down harder on the galaxy. But the fight can take a toll, and you eventually need help. When Memphis Nest pulls up her mask on Savareen, it does not reveal the face of a hardened warrior trying to dominate the other side. It is the face of a child forced to grow up too fast, and it was a leader in need of a drink because she's tired of doing this alone. She's exhausted, and she needs help. And to get the help that she and so many others need, the pleas have to hit the ears of those with enough station and influence to take the fight to a higher level. But those ears don't hear the message because the boot-licking politicians have muddled that message. When a young 9-year-old princess of Alderaan finds herself out in the galaxy, far from the home planet she is not allowed to leave for other, shall we say, bigger reasons, she finally hears the message. While wandering the hills of the planet Mapuza with a broken Jedi finding his way back into the fight, the young princess sees that the Empire that promised to protect is in truth destroying all it touches.
It wasn't always like this here. There were fields and families, and then the Empire came in and ravaged it all.
But the Empire was supposed to be helping us.
The privileged don't easily feel this, and many on the ground, from a seemingly likable transport driver named Freck to a young woman on the lam like Jyn Erso, don't want to look up.
I've never had the luxury of political opinions.
They don't want to get involved. It's too dangerous, too difficult, and puts you in a place where you have to fight for more than yourself. And even when someone does change and get involved, like Jyn did, it is even more difficult to get those secure in their positions to join the fight. For generations, Star Wars fans just knew the right thing to do was to fight. But we all, like Jyn Erso, were surprised to learn that many faces of the rebellion listening to Jyn's plea to take action against the Empire weren't sure if it was actually time to fight. They lacked the conviction to try, and in the case of Senator Noah Jabel, just refused to believe the severity of the impending doom. It's just easier that way.
Death Star, this is nonsense.
It's easier not to fight. It's easier for the rebels not to rebel. But while those above hemmed and hawed over when, how, and the why, so many others had already begun to fight, each in their own way, which is both inspiring and problematic. Warriors like Saw Gerrera and Cham Syndulla were not only refusing to sit back, they were fighting the Empire on their level, or even sometimes going lower. Saw Gerrera was pushing the boundaries of the very act of rebelling, never wavering as to why you should fight. Saw had his own version of how to fight, telling Mon Mothma,
"The Empire considers both of us criminals. At least I act like one."
Saw and others like him had put the foundations of the early rebellion on shaky ground.
Politics have failed us. We have no choice.
While diplomacy might still have some place in the fight, especially if it was a shield to the real resistance building behind it, Saw was perhaps bringing too much attention to the rebellion, making it harder to convince those unsure of joining the cause to do so. It also emboldened Imperials like Orson Krennic to use the violence created by Saw and his kind to increase Imperial actions in the name of protecting the citizens, all while being used to protect the resources needed for projects like the Death Star. And when Saw took out an Imperial governor at the Sakula Blossom Festival, his brutal tactics not only took out the intended Imperial targets, but guests, citizens, and worst of all, children. This was not what leaders like Mon Mothma needed, and certainly not what they wanted.
Saw Gerrera is an extremist. His militancy has caused the Alliance a great many problems.
And while Saw kept fighting with his methods, smaller groups like the Cell led by Hera Syndulla continued to fight on their own. Hera had seen firsthand both the occupation and erosion of her proud Twi'lek culture on Ryloth and the hyper-focused, almost overzealous way her father took up the fight for independence. But she pushed forward, finding the balance between family and fight and realizing it was all the same battle. The cells were seemingly endless and the ideas behind them varied. Roken, Tala, and those of the Path were there to preserve the light side and set out to save those in the galaxy still showing signs of the Force. Former Imperial Navy officer Jan Dodonna formed the Masasi Group, the largest cell in the burgeoning rebellion, and looked to gather resources for the fight. The likes of General Draven took to spying, assassinations, and fought from the shadows. Bail and Breha Organa held fancy state dinners to hide their meetings with rebel leaders, and that young princess, their adopted daughter, grew up fast to become Leia, the Princess of Alderaan, and she used her position to help others in need, even if it was at a cost for herself. These are the roads that lead us back to where we started, to when the unlikeliest of allies, Endor's Ewoks, joined the fight and helped the rebellion do the impossible, to when Mon Mothma bravely left the Senate, spoke out against the Emperor, and became the needed leader to unite the nascent rebellion already fraying at the seams, to when Admiral Raddus of the Mon Calamari will emerge from hyperspace and declare that he is part of the Rebel Alliance and war is coming with him. These roads lead us back to when the crew of Rogue One laid down their lives to beam up the plans to the Death Star so that days later a farm boy from the far reaches of the galaxy will heed the hero's call to rescue that princess so they can all go topple an empire. These are the roads we Star Wars fans have traveled on for years. And we know there was a happy ending for this particular chapter of the greatest saga ever told. But the prelude to this war carries some of the most important lessons for us all, and the Andor series is primed to dive into the heart of the Star Wars story. A story that will always be in the choices of those characters as they find hope amongst fear. The evolving rebellion is about to reach its final form.